The moment I kissed her, the entire neighborhood forgot I existed, and I didn't even realize it at first because the world looked exactly the same except for a thin trembling in the air like heat rising off asphalt. And when she pulled back, her lips were shaking and her eyes were wide like she was seeing a ghost, because she whispered, "You weren't supposed to do that." And before I could ask what she meant, a sudden coldness settled over the corridor outside her apartment like someone had opened a freezer door, and when I stepped outside, Mrs. Patel from across the hall walked right past me without even glancing my way, even though she always stopped me to complain about the HOA meetings. And at first I laughed thinking she was distracted, but when I called her name she didn't react and kept walking as if the hallway was empty. Then I saw the HOA patrol guy coming up the stairs and I waved, but he walked straight toward me, right through the spot where my shoulder should have blocked him if he wasn't carefully avoiding eye contact like he was trained not to acknowledge strangers. And when I asked him if everything was okay, he frowned and told me residents weren't allowed to loiter in this building unless they were registered. Then he pointed at his tablet and said I wasn't on the system at all. Not in the resident list, not in the visitor logs, not in the archived camera feed. And I laughed again thinking the tablet glitched, but the fear inside me rose when he turned the screen toward me and every field next to my unit said unoccupied and every image captured outside my door showed the hallway completely empty, even though I remembered waving at the camera every morning. And when I rushed downstairs to the office, the HOA clerk stared at me with that official politeness reserved for strangers trespassing in private communities, and she kept repeating, "Sir, which unit are you visiting?" as if she'd never processed my payments every month, never argued with me about mailbox lock replacements, never recognized me in her life. And when I told her my name, she typed it in and the system returned nothing. Then she typed the address and the computer displayed the same words again, unoccupied property. And the panic finally touched my skin like needles because everything that defined me here had vanished in a single moment. So I ran back to her apartment, the girl I had kissed, the girl I had been quietly falling in love with since the day she moved in. And she opened the door before I knocked like she had been standing there the whole time waiting for me, and her voice was shaking when she said, "I warned you not to get close." And I didn't understand what she meant until she stepped aside and I saw her hands trembling so hard she gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. And she told me something had shifted the moment our lips touched, because she wasn't supposed to form bonds in this place, not deep ones, not real ones. And she whispered that every person who crossed that invisible emotional line with her suffered the same fate, first being ignored, then erased from all records, then eventually from memory, until one day they simply faded like smoke and no one ever spoke of them again. And when I tried to tell her this was insane, she begged me to keep my voice low because the wall listened for disturbances, especially involving her, and I felt the walls closing in around me as she explained how the wall had warned her years ago that she must not let anyone fall in love with her because whatever force surrounded her punished attachment like some cruel guardian, trapping her in a life where affection meant destruction. And as I stood there trying to process the impossible, I saw her eyes fill with tears when she whispered that she had tried so hard to keep her distance from me, but she failed because she felt the same quiet, dangerous pull, and now it was already too late because my name had vanished from the building, my presence was slipping from everyone's perception, and this was only the beginning. She told me the first stage was disrecognition and that it would get worse quickly, faster than I could imagine, and as she spoke I felt the air thicken around us like reality itself had grown sensitive to my presence and wanted to push me out. And she pulled me deeper inside her apartment because she said the HOA patrol would soon make rounds and if they saw me they would treat me like a trespassing anomaly, which was far more dangerous than being ignored. And I watched her lock the door while her fingers shook, and I realized this wasn't fear of the HOA, it was fear for me. And she whispered that the last time she had let herself care about someone he slowly faded from everyone's memory until even she could no longer recall the sound of his voice. And one day he simply wasn't there, no body, no sign, not even a trace on the security cameras, and the HOA documented the disappearance as environmental anomaly, irregularity, with no attempt to find him because they knew, they always knew, and they told her afterward that she must never let it happen again. They forbade her from forming emotional ties and moved her to the most isolated corner of the building, but I had broken through her quiet routine simply by noticing her, talking to her, caring about her. And when I kissed her I had sealed my own fate because now the invisible process had begun, and she stared at me like she was memorizing my face before the world tried to erase it. And when I stepped toward the window I saw the HOA patrol moving from floor to floor with tablets that glowed with a strange scanning interface I had never seen before, like they were mapping energy rather than people. and the moment I moved the sensor blinked as if my presence caused a static flicker even though I wasn't being detected as a human. And she grabbed my wrist and whispered, "Don't draw attention, because once the HOA officially marks me as an unregistered anomaly they will activate the containment protocol," which she described in a shaky voice as something worse than simply forgetting. And she confessed that she had tried everything in the past to break free from whatever force punished her attachments, but it always ended the same. Someone vanished and she was left alone with memories that slowly crumbled like old paper. And I could see her battling guilt and longing, wanting to protect me yet wanting me close because she had been alone for so long. And I told her that I wasn't ready to let reality decide for us, that I didn't care about the curse or the HOA or whatever force haunted this building. And she grabbed my hands and told me not to say that because the curse grew stronger when someone chose her willingly, like it fed off the intensity of emotion. And as soon as she said this the lights flickered, the air hummed, and the sound of distant static moved through the walls like something alive searching for me. And she whispered that stage 2 was starting earlier than expected because our feelings were too strong. And I felt my heartbeat falter as I looked at my phone and saw my contact list rearranging itself, my own number turning blank, my messages losing my name like the device was rewriting history. And I told her I didn't want to disappear, and she said that was exactly why I would, because the curse took the ones who resisted first. And I held her shoulders and told her she wasn't alone and wouldn't be again. But she looked at me with a broken expression and said every person who promised that had vanished, and the curse always left her untouched, always alive, always grieving, and never allowed to forget. And at that moment a deep vibration passed through the building like the walls were exhaling, and she whispered that the HOA patrol was coming for me because the system had already logged my presence as undefined disturbance. And I stared at her as the doorknob began to turn on its own, and she whispered that we had only minutes left before I would no longer be able to stand in this reality. And even though fear clawed through me, I felt one thing stronger than fear: the need to stay with her no matter what price the curse demanded. The moment the HOA marked me as an undefined disturbance, everything around me began shifting in silent, violent ways, as if the building itself was trying to push me out. And she pulled me deeper inside her apartment, begging me to stay away from the windows because the patrol scanners had switched from visual mode to something she called shadow detection, a mode that hunted for anyone who existed outside the system's registered reality. And I felt a deep pressure behind my eyes, like something was squeezing my identity from inside, as if pulling pieces of me toward a place I had never seen but somehow recognized. And she held my hand in both of hers, whispering that I had to stay calm because panic accelerated the fading. And as she said that, I felt my fingers blur faintly like heat waves distorting the shape, and I yanked my hand back in shock, but she clutched my wrist tighter and told me that losing form was only temporary if I stayed close to her, because she was the only anchor strong enough to keep me in this layer of existence. And I couldn't understand how she had lived like this for years, hiding in shadows, pretending to be normal, navigating a world where love was a threat and closeness was a curse. But when I looked at her, I realized she wasn't scared for herself. She was terrified for me, and she confessed that the curse hunted connection, not people, that it devoured anyone who cared too deeply because it sought to isolate her fully, completely, eternally. And the HOA didn't control the curse, they only managed the aftermath by erasing records, adjusting memories, and constructing explanations so the community stayed calm. And while she spoke, the building lights flickered again, longer this time, darkness stretching like something alive crawling through the wiring. And she flinched because she knew what that meant. Stage 3. The point where the curse began stripping presence, making me unable to interact with objects, and I tested it by touching her lamp only to watch my hand pass through as if the glass were fog. And I stepped back in horror, feeling my heartbeat skip like rhythm was dissolving inside me. And she grabbed my face with shaking hands, telling me to look at her, to focus only on her, because remembering her name, her voice, her presence was the only thing strong enough to hold me in place. And as I stared into her trembling eyes, I understood that she had lived her entire life fearing the thing I was experiencing in minutes. And as the HOA footsteps approached, she pulled me into her bedroom and hid me behind the door, whispering that the patrol wasn't there to help, that once someone reached this stage they treated them like a volatile anomaly that needed containment, and containment meant separation, darkness, permanent disappearance. And she braced herself against the wall as the patrol knocked aggressively, demanding to know why her system logs showed irregular emotional activity in her unit. And she lied with her voice perfectly steady, saying she felt dizzy and accidentally caused the sensor spike. And when the patrol asked to scan her apartment, she calmly refused, citing Privacy Protocol Section 18, something. She clearly memorized as her only shield, and after a tense silence the patrol left, but the building didn't relax. It hummed with that same unnatural pressure, and she turned to me with a look that broke my heart because she knew the curse was accelerating too fast, faster than she could protect me from. And she whispered that the only way to slow it was for me to let her go emotionally, to loosen the bond the kiss created, to pull away from her in my heart. But the thought of detaching from her felt impossible because every part of me was tied to her now, and she whispered that if I didn't try the curse would take everything. The harder she begged me to emotionally detach, the more I felt the curse tightening around me like invisible hands pulling threads of my existence toward a void I couldn't see but could feel, a cold looping emptiness that tugged at my thoughts and blurred the edges of my body as if I were becoming part of the air rather than a person. And as she held my face between her shaking palms, I felt her fear radiating through her skin. Fear not of the curse but of losing me the same way she had lost everyone she ever dared to care about. And she repeated over and over that this was the only way, that the curse fed on longing, attachment, emotional gravity. And the moment my chest tightened with affection, it sank its claws deeper into my presence, pulling me closer to erasure. And I told her I couldn't just stop feeling something so real, something so strong, something that felt like the first true connection of my life. But she pressed her forehead to mine and whispered that love wasn't always about holding on. Sometimes it was about letting go to save the other person. And even though her words were breaking her, she forced herself to say them because she had already watched too many disappear into that void, and she wouldn't let me be another ghost in her memory. Another voice she could no longer recall. Another face she couldn't draw even if she tried. And as I looked into her trembling eyes, I realized she was right. That the curse wasn't after me because I kissed her. It was after me because I cared. Because she cared. Because together we created a bond the curse refused to allow. And while my heart screamed not to lose her, my mind understood the cruel truth that staying with her meant disappearing forever, leaving her alone again with another grief she could never voice. And with a pain I could barely speak, I took her hands off my face and stepped back, feeling the air tighten as the curse sensed the emotional distance. And I told her I was grateful for every moment with her, but I couldn't let her suffer another loss, and I wouldn't let myself fade into nothing while she blamed herself again. And the more I spoke, the more my body stabilized, my edges sharpening, my voice strengthening, as if stepping away from her was stitching me back into reality. And she watched with tears streaming down her face, but she didn't stop me because she knew this was the only way, the cruel right choice. And when I reached the door, she whispered that she would always remember me even if the world didn't. And I wanted to turn back, to run to her, to break the curse with defiance, but I knew one moment of weakness could trigger the final stage and erase me forever. So I walked away with a breaking heart that felt heavier with every step. And when I reached the hallway, I looked back one last time and saw her standing there like a shadow carved from sorrow. And even though she didn't say another word, her eyes told me everything, that some people love too deeply and some curses punish too fiercely. And as I returned to my apartment, I felt the world settle, my existence restitch itself into place, my name reappear on the HOA system, my reflection returned to mirrors, my weight returned to the floor, but the emptiness in my chest stayed, a hollow reminder of the girl whose love could break reality. And in the silence of that night I understood the moral carved painfully into my life. Sometimes the deepest love is the one that asks you to walk away, because not every love is meant to be held, some are meant to be survived. Moral lesson. True love is not proven by how tightly you hold someone, but by how bravely you let them go when holding on would destroy you both.